Hello, and welcome to Reel Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I'm pleased to have with me back on the show Autumn Adward. Starting over, Brad. I can't talk. Need to drink more water. Hello, welcome to Reel Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I'm pleased to have with me on the show Autumn Edwards. Welcome to the show, Autumn.
Hello, Angela. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And we are here. It seems to be the year of tribute episodes. Apparently, everyone great is dying, which seems to fit 2026 and 2025 pretty well. So, we are doing a tribute to the great Japanese actor, and I'm going to let you say it correctly, but I'll just try it once for everyone's chuckles at home. Tatsuya Nakadai.
Yeah, not
Um,
bad.
yeah, it's not bad for a first timer, right? So, who was lived a long time, 1932 to actually, he passed away in 2025. We're just getting to this tribute a little late. Often considered one of the greatest actors of all time, period, not just in Japan, one of the greatest world actors, which is another reason why it's so tragic we lost him, though he lived a good long life. Was an actor well known for working with some of the greatest Japanese directors, known for his expressive wide eyes, and for honestly just being in some of the best movies of all time. You fail to see too many actors of any country who are in as many great films as this actor was. We picked four today, but we're missing some pretty big ones, in part because one of the films he was in, The Human Condition, is a part one, two, and three. And Autumn and I recently watched that together on a vacation, and it's 9 hours. So we decided that kind of probably needs its own episode. But he is in that series. He was in Fires on a Plane. He was in multiple movies by Kurosawa. Maybe you could probably do it more justice. I know you were really anxious to do a tribute to him.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about him. Incredible actor. He's worked with so many great directors, like Kurosawa, Masaki Kobayashi, Hiroshi Teshigahara, Mikio Narase. The list goes on and on. He's got fantastic range, and I love seeing him every time.
And he was also, I think, in some ways rare in Japanese cinema in that he, I think, equally did modern films as well. You see,
Hmm.
this is, I think the films we selected are kind of a good, I mean, most of these are historical, but he was able to do modern films, which you see in one of our later films, The Face of Another. He did multiple modern pieces. He was easily looked, suited in a nice business suit and was able to pull that off as much as a samurai or warrior look. And so he was really one of those actors, like we think of the greatest Hollywood actors being able to do everything from comedies and westerns to romance and drama. And he was definitely one of those types of actors, I think.
Yeah.
And there's a great collection right now in Criterion Collection of those who have it or watching. I would suggest it. They have a collection of his films. It doesn't include everything. It includes everything except for one of the films we're talking about today. But it also has a great interview with him that's about 38 minutes long that I highly recommend people check out, where he talks about working with the five greatest Japanese directors. I mean, five of the greatest, not all of them are covered, but and his warmth as a person also comes off in that interview, and it was done when he was
Hmm.
older. So we're going to talk about four films today. These are a little heavy on his 60s, which of course is one of his great periods because it's one of the greatest periods of Japanese cinema, the 50s and 60s. But we do get into at least one of his later films. I will start off with our first one, which is Harakiri. I know I said wrong, by Kobayashi. This is a 1962 film, and it tells the story. He plays a ronin, which is a samurai without a master, who requests to commit what's known as harakiri, which is essentially suicide, within the manner of a local feudal lord, using the opportunity to explain the events that drove him to ask for this death before this particular audience. So it's a film that's done through flashbacks, which is not always usually my favorite use of a plot narrative, but here it works really, really well because we're discovering along with the people at this manner. Who, what is his story? Why is he there? Why does he want to commit this act in front of all these people? Turns out he's got some good reasons. So I reviewed the film on the show years ago, and it was a delight to get to revisit it because I hadn't seen it since then, and it's genuinely just a true masterpiece. From the music, who actually quite a few of these films, the music is by one of the greatest Japanese composers of all time, and I wanted to mention his name, and I'm going to mess it up. Toru Takamitsu? No?
Takamitsu.
Yeah, I'm in the range. Okay. So, and the music, I wanted to mention the music in this film and the set design, which is absolutely amazing. You wouldn't think it's basically almost a one set movie with the exception of a few smaller sets in the flashbacks, but a lot of it takes place in this one location, and the way that Kobayashi uses that location is absolutely astounding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really adore this movie. I really like the shift in registers that it has. Like, it starts off as this very slow, like, not slow in a derogatory way, but contemplative movie that, like, really just grabs you with intrigue right away, and you're being drip fed all these little hints at what might have went on, and you're trying to figure out what's going on here. And then there's kind of a big shift, a little, a while into the movie, where it becomes a little, well, not a little, a lot more action oriented, and it becomes you can feel, I think, a lot of the Western influence in that half, as it feels a lot like a gunslinger, who's come to town and is here to deliver justice. And I have to say, he just looks so damn cool in this movie. Like, that section towards the end, particularly, spoiler alert, when he goes and challenges one of the other samurai to a battle. I mean, it's just about the coolest anyone has ever looked in any movie. It's incredible, like, aura farming. I mean, he just looks amazing.
And he's in every shot of this movie, just about. So this is definitely a starring vehicle.
For sure, yeah. And you could tell he's having a lot of fun with it. This is actually the movie that he cites as, like, one of his favorite that he's ever done. And I think you can kind of feel why, because he actually got his roots as a theater actor. He started in theater before he was discovered by Kobayashi and moved into film as well. And this film, I think, because of the one set, location and everything, it really does feel a little bit like a stage play. In a very good way. Like, it's very controlled compositions and blocking and everything. And it just gives him a wonderful opportunity to shift through, like, so many different tones and so many different, like, kind of personalities, because his character has changed. Like, if you were to put the film in a chronological order, he starts off as this, like, kind of jovial, happy father figure. I wouldn't call him happy-go-lucky, but he's very pleased and, like, content with his life, and as it slowly falls apart, he becomes much more serious and then vindictive, and by the end, he kind of embodies this spirit of revenge in a really fun way.
And you get why by the end, too. I think that's part of the thing of him telling the story and seeing his character arc change. You understand why he's become so vengeful at the end. Like, who wouldn't be after what he went through and what his family was put through? It's also interesting that this film, along with one we'll be talking about in a bit called Kill, are both kind of these films challenging the moral code of the samurai in a way, or at least some of the hypocrisies in that type of code. And I think that was a popular theme in a lot of Japanese New Wave films in particular, but challenging some of the kind of moral conventions of traditional aspects of Japanese society, or even or challenging, people that were seen as honorable, like samurai, and his character really kind of poking holes in that and saying, how honorable is it to let this happen to someone? So I love a film with a good moral, and actually all four of these films have basically moral and philosophical underpinnings, which I love.
Yeah, Harakiri, Kill, and Ran, I think all of them really dispel the notion of, like, the honorable samurai. And Harakiri in particular, that's like its primary focus. It's right there in the title. Ritual suicide. What does it mean to do that? Why is it held, in such high regard by the samurai? When, if you kind of peel back the layers, it's really more of a tool that the systems, that be used to control the samurai and to, keep the daimyo and the emperor and all those in higher levels of power. keep them up there. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, well, great film, 5 stars. I think there's almost no arguments. Very few people rank it less than that, I think.
Yeah.
So
One of the
I think
greatest
that,
of all time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Next film is yours.
Yeah, so the next film we'll talk about is The Face of Another. Came out in 1966, so 4 years after Harakiri. And this one's directed by Hiroshi Teshigahara. And this is a film about a businessman whose face is disfigured in a workplace accident, and his doctor gives him the opportunity to try a new technology, which is a mask that's so lifelike that it allows him to assume a new identity completely. This movie is a fantastic exploration and dissection of perception and ego, like not just how we view others, but how we view ourselves, and how the views of others influence how we see ourselves. It's a very philosophical movie. I think most of the film are kind of these long sequences of dialogue exploring what it means to like wear a mask, both literally and metaphorically, right? It compares the literal mask that he's wearing to like women wearing makeup, which is another kind of mask, or people getting drunk who then use that as a mask to, unleash different parts of who they are. But all these things ultimately are ourselves. So it's a really great exploration of like, the psychological conception of the ego, not just like, oh, I'm so great, but like, who are you as a person? And I think it's got so many wonderful points to it. I think the set design and like the art direction is some of the best in just about any film ever. I mean, it's really, really gorgeous to look at. You think of the doctor's office that they're in, it makes no sense at all. As like, if it were to be in like real life, you would walk in there and you'd be like, what is going on? Is this like it's like kind of a hall of mirrors set up? I don't even know what's going on. But it is so striking and so beautiful to look at. And even the scenes where they're just like sitting in a little restaurant and they're chatting, like the blocking and the composition is so perfect and beautiful that you don't even realize you've just been in a scene that's just two people talking for like 10 minutes straight. I mean, the direction is absolutely wonderful here. And Nakadai has an incredible opportunity to flex his acting chops, I think.
For sure. And this is one of my favorite films. This is, to me, a 5-star film. I saw this years ago again for this show, and I was blown away by it then. I got so much more out of it on second viewing because the first time, to be honest, I was so just taken with the visuals. It's some of just the weirdness of the visuals. This is like the opposite of realism. It's, so just a couple things to note there. The psychiatrist's office was designed by this famous Japanese designer, and the wall of ears that's in the doctor's office that you're like, why is there this wall of ears? Well, it looks really freaking cool, for one thing. It was designed by this famous artist, Tomio Miki, who is just an amazing artist. The music, again, is by Toru Takemitsu, and so, one of the greatest Japanese composers. So you have all these people working essentially. And of course, the actor that we're talking about, Tatsuya Nakadai, is one of the most famous actors at that time, and they're all working on what's essentially an avant-garde film. I mean, I really feel this film fits in. It's not the, I watched it with my husband on Friday. He had never seen this film or any films by this director, like Woman of the Dunes or Pitfall, and so it's an interesting introduction to his films. But and he was very confused in part of it. It's like, why? Oh, so now there's one thing you didn't mention. There's a whole other separate tale of this young woman who has half of her face scarred. That's told in contrast with his tale. And they never say this, but she brings up the fact that she's from Nagasaki, and so my interpretation is that it happened to her as a child, and that's why her and her brother were orphaned, and they're so close, that it happened because of the atomic bomb, and so she's constantly asking her brother, will there be another war again? So in addition to the film working on a universal basis, like you mentioned, the psychological complexities of individuality and how much we have like kind of bound up in our image. There's also these interesting political theories going on here about what happens to a society when it loses its identity or when it's fractured in some way as a whole. And you see the difference in his story where he gets very angry, and then hers where she again, spoiler alert, walks into the ocean. So it's very sad in some ways too. There's also this great scene where we see these swarms of Japanese civil people in the streets, and all of their faces are basically blank at one point. And the doctor, right before that, when they're in the pub, is talking about the dangers of anonymity. And as I was watching with my husband, he goes, "Oh, he wouldn't have known this in the '60s, but this is just what the internet did. Was basically everyone becomes anonymous, so everyone becomes dangerous because they feel like they can do anything anonymously." And I was like, "Wow, that's really good. I'm going to write that in my letterbox review." So I stole that for that. But yeah, there's just a lot going on in this movie. I love it.
Yeah, you can feel its influences from movies that came before and how it's influenced so many films after. Like I felt Persona,
Oh yeah.
it feels so tied to this movie. They came out in the same year though, so I think it's just coincidence, but it's a fascinating coincidence.
Well,
But
'60s things were getting wild.
for sure, yeah. But I feel like you get bits of like meshes of the afternoon. You get like there are sequences that yeah, the whole movie does feel a little Godardian for sure, but like Breathless, like where they're just, it feels like they're kind of just run and gun shooting like on the streets. Like I'm sure so many of these people are not aware they're actually in a film right now. And I don't know,
Some of
there's
those
a
still
bit,
shots where they in the cafe and then also in the bar where they go into still photography seem very Godardian to me.
yeah, and there's a bit where it feels like he's doing a little bit of Travis Bickle, like he's like looking at himself in the mirror and he's testing out the mask, going, he's doing all these funny faces, and it
Yes,
just made me
yes,
think
definitely some
of
Taxi
Travis
Driver in there.
Bickle,
I can
yeah,
see
like
that
talking to
too.
himself.
Which
It's
also
just
is way ahead of its time. I think it's a
yeah.
masterpiece. I really do. I think it's underappreciated. It bombed when it came out, both critically and commercially. The New York Times, and many critics just bombed it, and it just goes to show how people aren't paying attention. Because now it's considered a masterpiece, but I agree with that. I also have to just mention really quickly. I know we need to move on to the next film, but that pub that they spend a lot of time on, that he and the psychiatrist keep going back to, is like a German pub. And at one point, there's a Japanese woman singing a German like pub ballad, and the whole thing where they're drinking out of these huge steins, beer steins, like you would see in Germany. Again, it brought back like the idea of World War II to me, and I just thought, what a weird place to be to be the main bar you go to in a movie, to be this like German style pub, but everybody in the bar is Japanese. So it was just another moment. Again, it brought me back to that World War II aspect, which isn't ever really talked about in the film, but is, I feel like it's kind of there all the time. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess we'll move on to our next film. We could talk about that one forever, but our next film is Kill, with an exclamation point. Came out in 1968. It's directed by Kihachi Okamoto, and this is a film about two outsiders, a former samurai turned yakuza, and a farmer who dreams of being a samurai. And they meet in a dusty old town seeking opportunity because they are both starving, out of a job, and looking for anything to latch onto. They're quickly wrapped up in a conspiracy involving a group of rebel samurai who are betrayed by their nefarious clan leader. Tatsuya Nakadai plays the yakuza who sides with the rebels while doing his best to dispel the farmer's naive conception of the noble samurai. So again, kind of like Harakiri, where like he plays this character that's like just out to dispel, these myths about the Bushido code and how the samurai are all noble and everything. But this is a much more like directly fun movie than I think any of the other ones that we're reviewing today. It's really just a lot. I mean, it's a blast. It's narratively dense, but there's a lot of like twists and turns. I think each character is super fascinating. I think it's beautifully shot. It really feels like a spaghetti western in so many, the best ways. I just have a really good time with it. Nakadai is kind of like this. He's very sly. Like, I don't know how else to put it. He's very sly. He's very not withdrawn, but he's not thrown by so many of the other things. He's kind of this character that like knows more than most other people around him, and he's kind of playing it to his advantage at many times. There's elements of Yojimbo in here, elements of Seven Samurai, spaghetti westerns. It's just a really great blend of so many great things.
yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly. It's the only one of these films I only gave 4 stars to, but that's just because it's great, and everything else we're reviewing today was a 5-star classic. This one is a great film, though. It might even be 4.5 stars on second. This was the only one I'd never seen before, so I was watching for the first time, so that might be part of it too. But I enjoyed it thoroughly. It very spaghetti western-ish, which is sort of funny because spaghetti westerns were kind of based on samurai films to begin with, and then it sort of seems like a Japanese film that's based on a spaghetti western, which is based on a samurai film. So it's a great parody in a way, and it's a lot of fun. His character in this film, ironically, did remind me of the lead character in Yojimbo, because he comes in from out of town. He's kind of this guy who's like, oh, I don't want any part of any of these people in this town, which is also a little bit like the Gary Cooper character in High Noon or whatever, like, I don't want to get in the middle of this, but then he ends up getting in the middle of it anyway, right? So it's very much like the story in Yojimbo. In fact, I was watching it, I was like, the story kind of seems familiar to me. Oh yeah, it reminds me of, but like you said, it also has elements of Seven Samurai, Yojimbo, lots of other films, as well as High Noon. It reminded me of some of the Hollywood westerns as well. So it is a lot of fun. Has a great cast of characters, a lot of faces I recognize, couldn't tell you their names, but just as they popped up, I'd be like, I know that guy from other samurai and Japanese action films, so that's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I really like the kind of overall theme in this one, where again we are like demystifying not just the samurai, but like we're taking a closer look at all sorts of different like socioeconomic positions within society. Like you have the poor farmers, you have just the townspeople, you have the samurai who, even though the farmers and the poor look up to the samurai themselves are betrayed by those higher than them, the warlords who are then under the thumb of the emperor, and there's always a bigger fish.
Right.
And I think it does a great job of like
the hierarchy.
Yeah, kind of looking at that hierarchy and seeing how nefarious it can be.
Right, even the big bad, as I like to call them, the big bad in this movie, the big bad guy, he's nervous because there's another guy from out of town that might come in and see what he's been doing and get him in trouble. So even he's not the top dog, right? He's worried about this other lord that might come in. That whole part of the plot was a little bit, I have to admit, so there's a lot of like plot mechanisms in this film that I wasn't always following, and then partially after a while I just stopped worrying about it and just had fun with the characters and who was going to get off next, and all the little wheelings and dealings were fun, but I didn't worry so much about like, what was this person and that part, and are they doing this now, and
it's a dense film. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, exactly. Especially for something that seems on its face, for it to be a spaghetti western, there's a lot of maneuvering happening. So I want to make sure we have enough time for our next film, because this is the big one.
The big one.
Oh, it's me.
It's you.
And the big one. And yes, so we've talked a lot about films from the 60s, actually because Nakadai, that's one of his big periods. He started, I think, Human Condition was considered his big breakout role, and that's like 59,
55.
I believe. 55? Okay, I was thinking it was 59, but it's,
it
late 50s. And here we jump ahead a little bit to 1985 with Ron by Akira Kurosawa. It is a historical action epic. Inspired by Shakespeare's King Lear. I will say loosely inspired, and set in 16th century Japan. In this film, Nakadai plays an aging warlord who divides his kingdoms among his 3 sons. And it doesn't go well, just like in King Lear. In King Lear, it's 3 daughters, and here it's 3 sons, which is interesting, an interesting take on it. It leads to betrayal and conflict. This is a film that Kurosawa made. He was in a bad period in his career. He was having trouble getting his movies made in Japan, which is sort of mind-blowing to think about, but let's remember that Charlie Chaplin also had trouble getting his movies made in America at one point. Like this happens to a lot of our master genius artists, is at some point Japanese society decided that Kurosawa was too old-fashioned. They didn't want to fund his movies. He was difficult to work with, etc. So he was more and more trying to do films that had with international financing. He'd had some flops, and he managed to get some financing to make a historical epic that he'd been thinking about since the 70s and just hadn't been able to get the financing to do. And of course that was financing from France that got him to make this movie, which a lot of people feel like, and I would agree with this, that this is a wonderful culmination of everything in Kurosawa's career. All of his passions, the things that interested him, the moralities, the the, everything that was who he was as an artist, he kind of builds up to in this moment. It is an epic. It's, almost 3 hours, not quite. Although honestly, compared to today, we have films that are almost 3 hours that have like nothing to say. So I feel like this is like nothing to get through this in comparison. And there's so many great actors in this, and this is not just Tatsuya's, film, but he is the aging warlord, and here we get to see him play a much older character. But again, using his eyes so well, those huge expressive eyes of him, because they have him aged as a very old man. He wasn't as old as he's playing in this movie in 1985. He didn't even look that old almost right before he died. He didn't look as old as this character. They made him very white, like ghost-like, and has this crazy white hair that sticks out. And it's just a bravado performance, but the whole film is sweeping in scope. It's one of the best looking films ever made in color. It's absolutely just the one really regret I have so far in my life, which I hope someday I'll get to see this on the big screen. I've never seen Ron in the theater, and I'm like properly shown in the theater, and it's just the kind of film that, watching it on your TV, the whole time I was watching it, I kept thinking, I really wish I could see this in a theater with the sound around me and on a big screen, preferably in 35 millimeter, if I could, have my very last wish. So.
Yeah, just an absolutely pitch perfect movie. I love the way that Nakadai looks in this film. I think it's like wonderful. He really looks like kind of like a war demon that is now has no war to fight. Like it looks like the wisps of hair remind me of like flame almost. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just like gone out now. He's just, like you said, so wonderfully expressive. His eyes carry so much. But I would be remiss too if I didn't shout out some of the other performances. I really love the Fool in this movie. It's played
Peter.
Peter, our star of Funeral Parade of Roses. Like, what a fun. I didn't know that the first time I saw this film, and then I looked it up this time, and I was like, oh my gosh, I knew they felt familiar. Peter is so wonderful in that role. But, we're going to focus on Nakadai here. He's absolutely incredible. His body language, I think, as expressive as his eyes are, his body language was also really good too. He really feels like a 9,000-year-old man, like he's playing here. But then there are other moments too where like he gets very frantic, and just like the way he carries himself, he just has a real gravity about it that I think is incredible. And I have to give a shout out to him too for putting his life on the line too for this movie, just like Mifune did in Throne of Blood. Here Nakadai is in a castle that is burning down around him, and he's just kind of slowly walking around and making his way out.
And it's just real.
And it's real. It's an absolute like bravado sequence. I think it's incredible. Kurosawa, the master that he is, I love the way he lets that scene play out with like no real sound except the score. Like it really just took my breath away watching this. I thought it was absolutely incredible. It's one of those movies where you just have to see it because words can never do it justice.
And it's also the kind of movies that aren't really made as much anymore. I read this essay yesterday that was absolutely profound, great essay about this movie, but also had me weeping. It talked about how movies like this just aren't made. I mean, they employed 1,400 extras, hundreds of horses, these on-location shooting, Technicolor. The whole thing is orchestrated perfectly. The music is wonderful. The photography is wonderful. Everything is on point. Everyone is, making it. It reminds me of the absolute best films David Lean ever made, or someone like that. Epics done the way they should be done. So, and it's a great film to be able to say you did in your for Kurosawa towards the end of his career. So one of his last films, in fact. So we have to wrap it up, but thank you, Autumn. That was a great tribute. I hope people check out some of this actor's films, or all of them. Have a great day and great movies.
Bye.